Welcome to episode 153 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer-director Ditto Montiel. He just did a film called Man Down starring Shia LaBeouf and Gary Oldman. But he's done a bunch of really interesting films over the last 10 years. He's a real artist and is very forthcoming about how his career came together, so stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 153. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Again, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. Quick few words about what I'm working on. Once again, the main thing I'm working on is post-production on my crime action thriller film, The Pinch. The second rough cut is in, so now I've got to go through that and do another round of notes. We've really spent a lot of time on this latest version, and it's definitely starting to feel more like a movie. My goal now is to try and have locked picture in early January. These things always take longer than expected, but hopefully it won't go much past that. And then I can kind of get the other people, the composer, the special effects, all of these others, the dialogue editor, sound editor, all of those types of people can start working on their end probably in early to mid-January once we have locked picture. Anyway, that's what I'm working on. Now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing writer-director Ditto Montiel. Here is the interview. Welcome, Ditto, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Cool. Happy to be here, man.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Well, I'm from Astoria, Queens. The entertainment business was, I don't know, not really on my mind. I just grew up in the hardcore scene in New York, punk rock hardcore world, which was a complete do-it-yourself world, so none of us were particularly good enough to play other people's music, so we wrote our own, and that got me, the bug to write, so,
Mm-hmm.
But it starts with a bunch of dumb lyrics complaining about, people on your block or something, and then writing is writing, so somehow it turns into a do-it-yourself attitude, that kind of always stuck with me,
Yeah. So then maybe take us through. So you're in this music scene. How did you actually take those first steps to make films? Did you start doing like experimental shorts? What were those first steps into the film business?
Well, like I said, is like, coming from, I never went to school or any of that for any of this. I was just a fan of TV. I was a TV kid,
Mm-hmm.
mainly. I got a job, my friend who, he had a music studio, and I kind of had nowhere to go and no job, nothing in New York. And he opened up a studio out in Los Angeles and said, I could work there and I could live there, and I kind of needed both those deals, and so I said, I don't know if I could live in California. And so anyway, I went there and started working at a place, and they would work on commercials and records and all kinds of fun stuff like that. And like I said, I just grew up writing, like anybody else, on napkins and put it in my pocket. And, you thought you had a genius idea, and then you thought you just have a bunch of dirty napkins. And, and then I just would put one day I just had this idea to pick up a typical notebook that you write in, in pen, like you have in grade school, one of those black and whites. and I just started writing, a story, well, actually something that my brain could handle, which was very simple stories, page by page. Okay, this is going to be a story about this guy, and it's a page long, people that I had grown up with or that had, moved me in my life, and I got to about 20 pages, and then I remember thinking, how long are books, and then I saw, books are like 200 pages, so I was like, I'm a tenth of the way there. Let me see if I can keep going here, and that sounds like a strange thought, but for movies, it was the same thing when I was working at my friend's place in California. Me and the guy we were working in a dub room, and the guy who is the editor on all my films now, we worked there together making dubs of anything that would come in, and then we started messing with iMovie, which was the free program, and just for fun. I mean, neither of us had any dreams or anything of being in movie business. That seemed, it wasn't even on the radar. We were just having fun, and we started making we had a little camera there, and we would just film stuff, and then we'd intercut it with sound, and my friend used to call us collect at my job from prison because the receptionist would let him get through, and we started recording it, which is probably not the most ethical thing to do. And he'd tell me about what it was like in prison. He had been there for a long time, and we started putting that into iMovie with visuals, and then we put music on it, and we were just like, oh, this is kind of fun. And we got it to about, 3 minutes, and then 5 minutes, and then a 7-minute thing, and then similar to the book idea, I was like, how long are movies? And like, okay, about 100 minutes. And it's like, okay, well, we're about 10 minutes, so we're a tenth of the way there, So it's always been a very gradual process for me, and just starting, like I said, coming back from the hardcore roots that I grew up in with a do-it-yourself attitude that, well, I'd rather play our own songs, even if they're not as good as some of the big bands, but at least they're ours. And that was the evolution of what got me into this weird business.
Yeah. So then let's talk about that. Did you eventually take that 7 minutes and turn it into a feature film? You did finally hit the 100-minute mark?
Well, in a way, yes. I mean, the pages became a book. And a guy I used to work with at Tower Records in New York, David Weemay, got a job at a publishing company. And I remember talking to him once and saying, hey, I got I got like 200 pages. So I sent him literally 200 pages, handwritten. I copied it from a copy machine, and insane enough, they published it. And I think we probably sold about, 15 copies, but it was real, and it was, okay, I have an ISBN number, it's a real book, and it just seemed, I couldn't believe it. It felt so satisfying in a way, and then, like I said, we started, me and Jake, my friend, we started messing with these things. Like I said, they were 7 minutes long, and then we started thinking, gosh, like, maybe this could be a movie. And then we had this idea, and as strange as it is, the guy I worked with, Jonathan Elias, he was good friends with Robert Downey, the actor. And I had known Robert as well over the years, just because we always bounced around New York, and similar circles, we'd run into each other in different places. And he came in one day, and I mean, it's much more complicated than this, but I was just like, hey man, check this weird idea out, And he looked at it, he's like, wow, that's cool, we should do a movie. And I was thinking, yeah, that's what we've been thinking, And then I gave him my book, which he's probably the 16th person that had it on Earth. And luckily, he enjoyed it, and then we started talking, and then he brought in, it's such a crazy avalanche of things that I never could have expected. A few weeks later, Trudy Styler, who's a producer and married to Sing, was looking to do a new movie with Robert. And we all got together, and it was insane. It was like, wow, I'm like trying to just live here, and now I'm hanging with these people, and they were talking about really making a movie, and so I just got really nervous and wanted to write a script, because I thought, oh my gosh, okay, if we're going to actually do a real thing here, it's not just going to be me and my friends running around doing whatever the heck we want, Mm-hmm. I gotta do a script, which I had absolutely no idea what to do. And this is so corny and nuts, and it almost doesn't sound real when I say it, but I had just been in Los Angeles not very long, I had no idea about how anything worked. And so what I did was I knew that they liked the script. I heard them talking, I was decoding how this works. And they liked a script called The United States of Leland, which was a movie actually that Ryan Gosling was in. And so I went to on Hollywood Boulevard. It sounds like Abbott and Costello, but it's real. And I went to a store that sold screenplays. This is, very early internet days, so it wasn't like you would find the script online. At least I didn't know how to. So I went to a store and I bought The United States of Leland script so I could see what it looked like,
Mm-hmm.
So I went on Microsoft Word and I copied exactly how it looked, and I started writing my story because I knew it had to look professional because these are legitimate people, Robert and Trudy and Sting, So I would copy INT, and I actually thought it meant introducing, interior, and EXT I thought it meant exit, and I'm like, okay, introducing a street. Okay, I get it, so I would introduce my street. So where it said introducing, whatever it said in the United States of Leland, introducing whatever street they were on, I would say, okay, introducing 31st Street, because that's where my story took place. And I actually remember, and I copied it literally scene for scene. Okay, if a scene ends here, my scene better end here, which is nuts. And at one point I remember, I had no idea. It was just nuts. And Robert came in and I said, Robert, I got to ask you a question. I've been looking at this script and they keep reintroducing these streets. And he's like, that's interior. And I was like, what? And then I said, and then they exit streets. And he's like, that's exterior. And I was like, wow. So that was my introduction to script writing. And so anybody out there who wants to know, INT, it's interior. It's inside. And then when you want to go outside, EXT.
That is
awesome.
That's the greatest story to break into the industry.
It is ridiculous, but at the end of the day, writing is writing, and sure, there's a format and everything, but luckily for me, I dealt with people like Robert who are kind of out there enough, and Trudy, that they sort of saw something through it and gave me an impossible chance. I mean, I don't even know I don't know if there are odds for something like this coming together. It's just a bizarre trip,
Yeah. And so how did you get yourself, so clearly at this point he realizes that you're a novice. How did you approach him and say, well, I want to direct it too? Was there any pushback on that?
Utterly ridiculous. It was like I was trying to use every Jedi mind trick as humanly available. I would sit there. It started, to back up a second, Robert gave Trudy my book, and because it was an ISBN number, I think everyone took it seriously. Even though I think, like I said, if 15 people bought it, I'm shocked, but it was real, and it looked like it had a cover, and luckily she read it and said, wow, I think this could be a great film. And then at the time there was a movie out, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, but Ben Kingsley was in it, and he yells no in it a bunch of times. It was, oh gosh, I can't remember. Sexy Beast. Okay. And Trudy said, I contacted the writers of Sexy Beast, and they're willing to do this on spec, which means for free. I was learning this as I'm going, but they're not available for a couple of months. And so that's when I thought, oh my God, I have a couple of months here to give it a shot myself, And that's when I went through this whole buying the United States of Leland thing, and I got it to a point where it probably made no sense to the normal person, but it was like 160 pages, Literally I wrote it in 2 weeks in total insanity, and sent it over to Trudy, and I pretended that a writer in Hollywood that I knew his name wrote it, because I said, if they think it's me, they're going to think I'm an idiot, and that I'm trying to infiltrate this world. So I put this other guy's name on, and I said, hey Trudy, this guy, he's a real writer. He wrote it. Take a look at it. And she read it on an airplane. And when she landed in New York, she called me. And she says, it's pretty out there, but I think this guy's got the heart of the story. And I said, I wrote it. And she said, what? and then it became a process of working with Robert, pretty hands on, and Trudy. And they had a script doctor guy named Alex Francis, who worked at her company, who was a godsend to me, because he just was just a really smart guy that was willing to go on the weird trip that you have to go on with me, and it became a lot of discussions about script, and why do you have the scene? You know, I was learning as I was going, and you know, it was so then we had a script that we felt pretty good about, and then I started thinking, okay, I'd really love to direct this, but how the hell on this earth am I going to get anyone to think, you know, that I could do that? I didn't even know what interior meant 3 weeks ago, you know, and so then me and the editor who I work with, that we were still working in the dub room at the time, we really went crazy and started cutting weird little shorts on iMovie, zero budget. When I say zero, I mean zero, like complete zero, you know, nothing. And like as anyone can do these days, you know, and showed it to Robert, just sort of hoping that he might get the hint that I was getting at, and he says, you know, why don't you direct this, you know? And I mean, you know, the guy he's a good friend and a great artist, you know. And I said, well, if you could ever talk Trudy into that, boy, that would be incredible. And he says, well, let me give her a call. So then I get a call from Trudy. This is so bizarre, going back into this crazy 6 months. Trudy calls me up and says, well, now Mr. Downey thinks he can direct, and I think we're crossing a line here. And I said, well, she said you did this weird little short. I'd like to look at it. So I showed it to her, and she says, okay, it's interesting, but you've never made a movie before. Here's the deal I'll make with you. If you can make a short film, 10 minutes long, with Robert in it, he said that he would come for a day with you. I'm not going to give you a budget for it. Just go do it with your little camera and find a way to record. And we had a ADAT player, you know, for sound. And if you make something that is the flavor of the film you want to make, and I like it, I'll let you direct it. And I couldn't imagine a better opportunity or deal on the table for me, that's for sure. Yeah. So, Robert, we went down to my friend's music rehearsal studio. It's pretty bizarre. In Hollywood, this guy had a music rehearsal studio called Swing House, still around, and rented a room for $15 an hour for 2 hours. And Robert sat in there and read this thing, and I mean, he's Robert Downey, so I'm going to kind of look good no matter what I'm doing, you know? And then I just paid to go to New York, you know, got a plane ticket, you know, Tower Air. It was really cheap at the time, $200 round trip, and went to my friend's house, apartment, and I found his little brother and said, find the craziest little kid you got here, and we filmed him for an afternoon, and then went and cut this thing together, and Robert and Trudy said, okay, you can direct it. And, you know, it's a bigger process than that, but that's kind of how the madness worked. And then the crazy thing is, along the way, someone submitted that 150-page script that had somehow been floating around Hollywood, you know, to the Sundance Labs, that I had never heard of. And I got a call at that job one day from the labs, Michelle Satter, who runs them, saying, hey, we really like your script. We'd like you to be in the Sundance Labs. I don't know if you know about the labs, but sure. Yeah, and it's so they pick about, I think, 12 people a year or something like that, and bring you in for free, and you get, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better school. So I didn't know what it was. I actually thought it was like a learning annex thing, you know. So when they called me up, I was like, well, how much is this? And they're like, it's free. And I'm like, what do you mean it's free? And they're like, yeah, and I said, well, how do I get to Utah? And they're like, oh, no, we'll pay for you to come to Utah. And I'm like, this sounds like a scam. And I was like, okay, you know what, give me your number and I'll call you back, you know. So like, I really thought it was a scam. I'm like, come on, what is this, you know? I had heard of the Sundance Festival, but not the labs. And so then I called Trudy up. And I said, I got this weird call from the Sundance Labs or something. She's like, what? And I said, yeah. She goes, I told my girl, she goes, you got to call them back right now. That's a really good thing, you know? So I called, and then I got to go through the labs, which was incredible. You know, the way it works there, at least for me, was, you know, you spend 2 weeks there. This is a whirlwind of madness, you know, but and they assign these incredible writers to you, you know, Frank Pearson, who wrote Dog Day Afternoon, and Cool Hand Luke, and one day you sit with Frank, and the next day you sit with Walter Mosley, the next day you sit with, you know, Alfonso Cuarón, you know, I mean, like, these remarkable writers, and they're telling you what they think of your script. It's Wonkaville for writers, you know, and it was just nuts, and it was like, wow, I don't know how the planets aligned for me so perfectly in those few months, but so then having gone through the labs, it gives you a sort of like a human ISBN number, like now you can actually do this, and then we went and made the movie. My first movie, Guide to Recognizing Saints. So it's bizarre, at least,
Yeah, no, that's just a fantastic story. As I said, it's very inspirational. It all started, though, with you writing that book and just putting stuff out into the world. And that's like one of the big things I preach on this podcast is just no matter what it is, just put stuff out there, because good things can happen when stuff is out in the world. If you don't put anything out in the world, really nothing can happen. So that's a very inspirational story.
I'm glad.
Let's dig into Man Down here. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick pitch or log line for the film.
Well, it's such a fun film. I mean, fun and odd, and it's hard to even get my head around it. We just had a really great screening last night. I'll just tell you what interested me. Like it was originally written by a guy named Adam. Simon, and he was homeless at the time when he wrote the script, dealing with his homeless situation, having a kid and sneaking into 24-hour gyms to give his kid a shower and stuff like that, and it was very scattered and kind of crazy, and it was messing with time, which is always interesting to me. And friendship and the passage of time is an obsession of mine. Once Upon a Time in America, Cinema Paradiso, these films I love. Play with that, and it went into a post-apocalyptic world, which growing up Planet of the Apes, was like the greatest thing that ever happened to me, And anytime the world ends in a movie, I'm in, and but there was this very strange spine to it, and I thought, man, this is nuts. I don't know exactly what I just read, because it was literally as if it was written by the guy who's in the film, which in a way it was, but it had such interesting, just so many interesting elements. So I said, I met with the producers who had it, and I said, I don't really know if I want to do this or what the heck I just read, because it's pretty out there, but I'd like to take a shot to decode it in my head, because I think there's something really special in there, So then I started messing with it, writing, and I had this memory of my father growing up. My father had epilepsy, and he would have grand mal seizures, which is pretty traumatic, and pretty intense. And and back then you were told, to make a knuckle with your two fingers and put them in his mouth when he has them, so that he doesn't bite his tongue off, right? Which is really bad advice. Oh, no one should take that advice, because he could bite your fingers off, right? So at one point when I was a kid, I remember I put my fingers in his mouth, and he was biting so hard, and I used to call, Monty was, I said, Monty, it's really hurting. And when they're in a state of a grand mal seizure, which is they're unconscious, right? They of course he wouldn't want to hurt you, but he's not conscious of it. But somehow it broke through me telling him that it hurt, and he stopped for a moment, which is really odd, and that strange vision carried me through this writing, my portion of the writing of the script, as I kept thinking, like, everything that his father is going through in the movie, the world ending and everything, he still saw his son. It's a strange way, for me, I have to find a way that I can get into a story in a selfish way, or else it's no fun, so while I didn't go through war like the character in the film goes through, I was trying to find my version of it, so I could relate to it and hopefully bring something personal, For me, writing is always very personal, I imagine whoever wrote King Kong had an attachment to King Kong, so it doesn't have to be your personal life growing up or your biography, but so my process is very much to find my way in, and for Man Down, it was that story about my father, our connection through all the through possible that he could see me, so that was the and then when the script got to a point where I started saying, okay, this is kind of starting to make sense, you know, Shia LaBeouf was in my first film, that crazy movie that I just talked about with Robert Downey, and we had always kept in contact over the years, and I've been wanting to work with him, and I was thinking, you know, this is the movie for him, man, you know? He'd be great, because, boy, this guy is, he's pretty fractured, you know? This character, and I have a feeling Shia could just crush it for a couple of reasons. One being he's a great actor, and the other is he is fractured, you know? And so I called him up, and I said, hey, man, I think there's something cool here. Take a read, and if you don't like it, no problem. And if you do, give me a call back. And 2 hours later, he called me and said, let's do this. And then, you know, the process of making the film as I'm learning, as I'm going still, it's nuts. And a lot of times you have, you know, there's all this foreign financing and things that can be tough and sometimes unhinging. But when you go to make a film, you normally have your dream list like anyone does, and it doesn't always have to be a huge actor. Sometimes it's just a great actor, you know, or someone that wow, this guy, I know this guy from this weird movie from the 70s, and how cool would it be to see him do this, you know? For me, Man Down was literally the dream of every actor you could dream of, perfect for the role. I thought, oh God, Kate Mara would just be great for this. And then we contacted Kate, and she said yes. And then it's like, okay, God, imagine we could get Gary Oldman for this role, and Gary says yes. You know, it's one of those things that, you know, that's usually where you start your list, and then you just work your way somewhere else, you know.
Yeah.
So we got this incredible cast, and then we got to make the film with, you know, Jai Courtney and Clifton Collins, Tori Kittles, you know, a lot of great actors that I had seen over the years, and, you know, kind of a, you know, that's the deal.
Yeah. No, that's a great story too. I just want to touch on something you kind of said. I don't want to give people, and you can pipe in and cut me off here, but I don't want to give the people the impression that because these two stories you've just told, it's like the planets aligned and everything went good. But you also just kind of alluded to the fact that sometimes these things can really get unhinged, and maybe you can talk about that for a minute. I mean, at this point in your career, there must have been some projects that you were really passionate about, you thought would be really great, but for whatever reason, they didn't quite navigate through this, you know, sometimes very mysterious world of film finance. And maybe you can just talk about that just for a minute, just so people aren't left with this idea that everything is always rosy with you and your projects.
Oh yeah, everything is far from rosy. You know, I think it's perspective is a big part of it, and I get lost in it too. You know, I mean, you know, it's nothing is easy, right? Like that's life, you know, and you know, it's odd, you know, when the first book I wrote and the movie that I made, the first movie, Guide to Recognizing Saints, because there's a thing that, you know, I'll go to an easier lesson that I learned, and this is corny to even try and be giving a lesson, but when I was a kid, I met Allen Ginsberg, right? One of the great writers ever. He took pictures of me, you know? He was just a weird old man to me. I had no idea who this guy. I hung out on the Lower East Side, you know, I was a teenager. And this weird old guy with glasses would come around and ask to take pictures, you know? And, I mean, he turns out to be one of the greatest writers in history, right? And he had this crappy little apartment on 13th Street. And I went up there, and I was like 17 years old, and I had a band, and he took a bunch of pictures of us, and we all were high and just nuts. And he said, and it went right over my head back then, but he said, you know what's so great about this apartment? It's rent control. And I was like, you know, yeah. And he's like, it lets me be a writer. You know, and it seems like a small thing, but I think of it now, and I think how great that his perspective was, because he lived in such a cheap little place, he could do what he loved, you know, as opposed to the dream of I could make $1 million in this business, you know. So I think that was so valuable to keep in the back of my mind, you know, that because look, it's nuts, and film financing is an animal that's growing, and it's unpleasant in a lot of ways. You know, you can write you know, you can be surprised who has, you know, worth, you know, if that's the right word for it, you know, in the foreign financing world. You'll be shocked, you know, wow, this guy, you never even heard of him, but somehow in Germany he can get you a bunch of money towards your movie, you know. Meanwhile, you know, look, when I made Guide to Recognizing Saints, Robert Downey was worth zero. Right? He was an Iron Man, you know? now you could probably, film him standing on his head for an hour and get the film financing.
Yeah.
So the laws of film financing don't always pertain to the best movie you can make. It just pertains to reality. And part of filming is weird. What's weird about movies is there's more of a business. $1 million to a bunch of broke people cannot sound like a lot. Like everyone's broke and we're dreaming. And suddenly someone says, you get $1 million to make your movie. And I'm like, I don't have $1 million to make this? Like if you were dreaming of opening up a pizza place, go to a bank and ask for $1 million, see how that works out, So there's a reality to how much money you're asking as a dreamer, someone to invest in you, So you can't overlook that. And it's easy to overlook it because you're supposed to be an artist, and you're supposed to, being a director is like being the most bratty, spoiled kid you ever met in your life, You're screaming, I want Elton John playing at my birthday party, Like you're fighting for a song that's going to cost these guys an extra $100,000 because you think it makes those 2 minutes better. But you're supposed to do that, So it doesn't come naturally for me. My father was a typewriter mechanic. We had nothing growing up, But it's so I see both sides of it. So instead of vilifying it, because that's very easy to do, as an artist, I also understand to some degree that, hey, I had a dream at 2 a.m. and I woke up and wrote it, and I'm expecting somebody who worked really hard to put $1 million into it. That's pretty nuts, But it's the reality of film. So it's keeping perspective. What is great about the world, I think, as it's changing, is can cut your movie really cheap now. It's think of music in the 90s, where there was still a few big old bands holding on to these remarkable recording budgets while a bunch of new people were just recording them, in their computers, Movies can like you said earlier, you just put stuff out there. I don't know where it's going to go, but I know that now you can certainly hit a lot of people with it, and they could see your talent or lack of talent or your cool little idea, and that's all it should be, Like I said, is growing up in the hardcore scene, we didn't dream of being rock stars or even playing anywhere bigger than the A7 Club or CBGB's in New York. We just like to do it, and so in a way, that's the way I still try to hold on to that. It's more corrupt as you go, But enjoying the process is a big part of it, and staying realistic. You're asking for a lot of money, and making a movie is not always a solo project. If you want to do it as a solo project, you can do it, and you could cut it on whatever the new iMovie is. Final Draft isn't all that expensive. Final Cut, whatever. And then you can post it on YouTube or stuff like that. But if you're going to start asking for money, you got to understand there is a reality to the world, and making a movie is there's going to be a guy, plugging in, the lights, there's an electrician there, someone's bringing food, these are realities too. So, I'm not trying to be, like a kiss ass to the establishment, but it's also being realistic. People, it's weird, you go around sometimes and people say strange things like, how do I make it? And I'm like, I don't even know what you mean. What do you mean make it? What is, well, it's a blue collar town. Don't be fooled by the glitz,
Yeah, no, excellent advice. So one last question. I get a lot of people coming to me as screenwriters asking, hey, how can I get such and such director attached to my project? And I'd be curious as a director to kind of get your opinion. How do scripts typically come for you? I mean, it sounds like Man Down was a script that was already written. Just maybe talk about just loosely, what is sort of the protocol for scripts getting to you? Do they go to your agent sends them? Do you just get them from friends? Do you get them from actors? How do you typically get scripts that you may want to work on?
It's a million different ways. Man Down came from a friend, just passed it on to me. I made a movie, Boulevard, with Robin Williams, and it was a guy who was writing about his life, coming out later in life, and it really sort of touched me, and a friend handed that to me, and I don't know how it works. I mean, I love when it for me, when you never know what's going to appeal to anybody or how the whole madness works. Like Allen Ginsberg said, don't follow my path to extinction. But there's absolutely no blueprint how it goes. You got to, the only thing I believe is, and I could be wrong. There's no proper advice. I would just say my version of advice would be, once in a while I get an email from someone who says, I've got 30 scripts. And I think, yeah, 30 scripts. I don't even know what that means, You kind of want to hear you have one, like, I got to make this one. Like, for me, it's like, that thing is burning in you, and then write 30 after it, But sure you got one. I think if you really feel it, like I had to do that. Like that book that I wrote personally, I had to do it, and it was going to exist. It really didn't matter if, Robert Downey was a blessing that I wasn't expecting, I was, that book came out without anybody caring, and I didn't care that 15 people had it, and that movie was going to exist, 17 minutes at a time, it was going to 10 to 17, it was going to get to 100, because I knew that was the magic number. It was probably going to be starring me and my friends, and we didn't have YouTube at the time, 10 years ago, it wasn't as it is now, so I don't know who would have ever seen it. It was going to happen. So I just feel like that's the road, like if you got to make something, you got to make it. And that's, as far as the director and all that, hey, when I did Man Down, Montiel is one of my most favorite composers ever. And I didn't know how to get to Clint, because we didn't have the money, and I literally went on Facebook and I looked up Clint Mansell, and, there's probably 20 of them, but one of them had friends that looked like, oh, if he's friends with these guys, this might really be Clint Mansell. So I wrote him, and I said, hey, man, like, I know this is a weird way to go about it, and he ended up doing the score for it. So I don't know the route, I still take whatever. I'll still take 20 routes to every destination, Half the fun is getting there, I get people writing me all the time on Facebook, and, it's not, I don't like to read so much, so it's not like I don't want to read everyone's thing, but hey, I don't know, I give everything a shot, and look up, because it's probably not going to happen that you're going to call up CAA or WME and say, hey, I got a perfect script for Scorsese, he's going to love this. My gut is it's not going to get to him, but try other routes, and or maybe a director that isn't so big, or look up Scorsese on Facebook. Maybe it's him. If his friend is the real Leonardo DiCaprio, I'm thinking you're heading in the right direction.
That's good advice. So how can people see Man Down? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like?
Yeah, it comes out December 2nd. Nationwide, and I love the movie. I think it's something pretty special, and I think you can check it out yourself. December 2nd, it'll be kind of everywhere.
Perfect. And then the final question, I just like to wrap things up by asking the guests how people can kind of follow along with what you're doing. If you're on Twitter, Facebook, you can mention those handles, and people can just like you.
I'm on Twitter and Facebook, but just my name. I'm the only guy out there as me.
Perfect.
Say hello.
Sounds good. I will wrap that stuff up. I'll get the actual links and put them in the show notes so people can click over to those. So, Ditto, this was a great interview. You're a real artist, and it was just great hearing from your perspective. So I really appreciate your coming on and talking with me.
Thanks, man. Just have fun with it. That's the deal.
Thanks. And good luck with this film.
Thanks, man. Okay,
Thanks.
Take care.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the one who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to production companies or agencies. We can provide an analysis on feature film scripts or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your projects, this is a great way to do it. We will also write a logline and synopsis for you. You can add this service to the analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Ditto. I really hope people are getting as much out of these interviews as I am. I found talking to Ditto both informative and inspirational. I think there's some great tactical tips in this interview. I mentioned in the interview creating stuff and putting it out there. That really was the key to Ditto's career taking off. He wrote a book and he was working on short videos. And then when opportunity presented itself, he was ready. Now, if you live in Nebraska, you might be saying to yourself, what are the odds that someone like Robert Downey is going to just come walking into my store? And that's a fair point. But if you take a step back and ask yourself, why aren't you living in Los Angeles? These sorts of connections can be made if you put yourself in the right position. And part of that is simply packing up your stuff and moving to Los Angeles. I've talked about this before, so I won't spend a lot of time on it here now. But if you're serious about being a screenwriter, why don't you live in LA? I hope the story he told about Allen Ginsberg didn't go over anyone's head. It's inspiring to hear about artists who were really committed to their craft. I mean, as Ditto said, he was one of America's greatest writers, and late in life, he still needed to make sacrifices so he could work on his art. I mean, that's very, very inspirational and just fascinating to see. I did this interview a couple weeks ago, and I just keep coming back to that story and sort of mulling it over and thinking about it. How can that apply to my own career? And I hope other people really think about that story as well. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.